to Tomorrow Today, the podcast where we talk about tomorrow, but today.
Dun dun dun.
My name is Nashville, and I'm joined, as always, by my favorite co-host.
Your only co-host.
My only co-host. Oh, I was really promised additional ones. What about?
Sorry. It's just me. It's Andy.
Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm lovely.
Are you?
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Today, we are talking about video games as therapy, which I'm very pro. Are you pro video games?
I'm actually not very... Well, I'm not pro video games. I'm just not a video gamer.
Okay, so what's your favorite video game?
Yeah.
Not even like a Mario Kart scenario?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel like Mario Kart's like kitschy and cool now, so like saying that makes you just sound like a dumb hipster versus like...
You can't like Mario Kart because it's too mainstream.
Well, you know what I mean. Like, it's not what it used to be back in the day.
Oh my god. You were worried that just liking it was going to make you a hipster, not that like you liked it before it was cool?
Yeah, I definitely liked it before it was cool, first off.
Sure.
Second off, I don't know, there as fun as that game was, it can't be the best game I've ever played. That's putting a lot of weight on that game. Like, I don't know if I can really like emotionally attach myself to Mario Kart 64 like that.
Okay, but you did also say that you weren't a huge gamer.
I'm not. But now it's like an identity thing. Got it.
Your reputation is on the line. I get it. I understand.
Yeah, maybe like Maniac Mansion. That's a throwback to Nintendo.
Wow. Okay, I was going to go with Minesweeper, but now I feel silly. Do you remember that game in like the 90s where you just like walked through hallways with a gun? Do you remember this? Doom, right?
Doom. I thought you were going a totally different direction. I was like...
I think that's the first video game I remember, but I do think it's funny that the millennial generation started off with like Minesweeper and Doom, and we all wonder why we have like generalized anxiety disorders.
What was wrong with that? Like, it's just, you could die around any corner. That was basically our high school, too.
Is that what? Anyway, this is a totally different episode. We're not really talking about video games, although we are sort of talking about video games. I got to sit down with the very, very fantastic Dr. Rachel Proffitt, who is at the University of Missouri, and she is an occupational therapist and a researcher, which was just fucking fantastic. But that has to lead you to the question, what is occupational therapy? No, you really weren't going to comment on that one, huh?
No, I was going to say, what does that have to do with video games? But all right, let's talk about occupational therapy.
Okay, so I am...
Therapize me.
Therapize you. I am not an expert in this. That will be very clear from the moment I start talking about it. And also, so this is just a very brief and very unscientific history of occupational therapy. Hang on to your butts. This one is wild. It's not.
You just call people's butts wild.
Wild butts. That's what we're here for tomorrow today.
Just butts.
Butts gone wild. Miami. You know what I mean? It's fine. We're fine. I'm fine. So occupational therapy. It's called OT. You'll hear us say OT a lot in the interview. It has a bunch of mysterious origin points. But here is the main takeaway. You can go all the way back on this one.
I can?
You personally.
What does that mean? Like, like that?
No, I didn't mean like back in... What? Is that a dance move?
It's like the back in time music.
Oh, okay. It wasn't quite...
Is that better?
I think that's less good. Anyway, we can go to the Greeks and the Romans, which was all the way back on this one.
Also known as the Gromans.
You are out of control this episode. Anyway, the Greeks and the Romans tended to treat people with physical or mental challenges as people. And so they used a series of, occupations, bathing, music, exercise, those things, to treat people with certain disorders and diseases. That was their starting point. From the Greeks and the Romans, though, you're never going to believe when we get back to occupational therapy. Take a stab at how long it takes us to treat the mentally ill as people.
I'm going to have to guess like the 70s.
Okay, so you're in the ballpark, right? It does take us to the 20th century. So we go from ancient times to like yesterday, essentially, in terms of treating people like people. Thank you, capitalism. I know that's not entirely your fault.
But you sure as hell tried.
But you really committed to the bit, you know what I mean? The primary uses of OT these days for neurodivergent children, to get them, into social programming, to get them into self-care, for sports injuries. So if, do you play sports at all?
Do I look like I play sports at all?
I'm not going to answer that. Anyway, so if you hurt yourself...
Well, when I'm casually chopping down a tree,
you're outdoors, I guess it's not formal sports, but it is sports for you, forest rehabilitation. So if you hurt yourself doing that, or as we will talk about in this particular interview, using occupational therapy as a way to help people with mental status challenges. So anybody that's had a stroke recently, an aneurysm, anything like that, where they have affected extremities, OT is your business. So in the 20th century, we have a mother and a father of OT, if you're curious. So Eleanor Clark Slagle, with solid name. You're never going to forget that one. So she opens in 1915.
So get the Kegels with Slagle?
Okay.
I'm sorry it took me that long to come up with that.
I was going to say, wow, you really had to think about that one. Which is funny because you didn't do anything with your face as I was looking at you, and you were literally focusing.
I was like, there's something there. I need to find it. Use that occupational therapy to dig in.
No. Anyway, in 1915, she opens this training program in Chicago called the Hull House, and basically she starts using OT.
It sounds like a sorority house.
Yes, it does.
Or a frat house.
Yes, it does. I'm sure there were some crazy moments. So basically, she starts using OT to train professionals in how to treat those with mental health changes or conditions. So she, with this dude called William Rush Denton, these are real names.
Totally not made up.
Just to clarify that. They create the National Society for the Promotion of Occupational Therapy, regretfully called NSPOT. Anyway.
Oh, man. They really were fucking visionaries.
They really
have to hand it to them.
They really were. Okay, anyway, that later becomes the American Occupation Therapy Association.
Oh, it became an occupation.
So it gets better. It's AOTA now. Just what you want. But basically, OT, just to sum that shit up for you, is an early modern medicine approach to incorporating holistic treatment. So Denton is credited as the father primarily because he really focuses on the definitions of occupation and how purpose and occupations can help you get better or just work with you to help you engage in social activities, etc. And the American Occupational Therapy Association still exists today. Anyway, so I interviewed Dr. Rachel Proffitt for the interview that you're about to listen to. We talked about video games and stroke victims, and those are two things that I would have never, ever probably lumped together in my life. What do you think? What was the likelihood that you were gonna...
No, I definitely wouldn't have said stroke victims should play more video games, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. It wasn't something I would connect at all. But it actually makes a lot of sense listening to her talk about it, right?
I haven't listened to her talk about it, so not yet. I will believe you. I think you're a
truth teller.
You are a person that tells things.
Yes.
And they sound like they make sense. So tell me how they make sense. Nash.
So basically, stroke victims often lose access to one of their arms during or after the stroke. And it can be hard for them to regain mobility or strength in that extremity. So the team created this video game where you're, canoeing down a river, I believe.
Sounds lovely.
Doesn't it sound... Actually, this is the kind of video game I think you would really enjoy because it's very calm. It's got big Ron Swanson vibes about it.
Yeah. I feel like I should be wearing flannel to play this game.
Yeah, I agree. But basically, it's more fun and engaging than regular occupational therapy because now we're incorporating some kind of game element, right? And the game itself is really dope.
I bet that's a pretty relative term. Pretty dope.
Well, sure.
I mean...
But it does sound dope, right?
It sounds better than alternatives, but probably not for most people.
Okay, for the reasons you'd have to use it, I suppose those are not dope, right? But playing the video game itself sounds really dope. That's where I'm landing on that one.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yes. So they use this video game as a way to get people more engaged with their therapies, and it sort of covers this, economic access to healthcare problem because they can serve a lot more people because of telehealth and this being a video game than they can if you had to physically drive to a location.
So just for clarification, we're talking about a 3D, you got the virtual glasses on, or is this just You got the little...
Oh, no, you're in it.
You're in it? You're in it to win it?
Yep,
that was
rowing.
So you guys didn't see that, but this was a very animated paddling action by Nash.
I keep forgetting that this is a voice thing.
Yeah, so if you guys are wondering, that's what it sounds like when she's kayaking.
Yeah, which I'm also not good at. Thank God we're on a lake and nobody can hear me. Oh, wait,
sound travels.
Sound travels over water.
That sound right there.
This is becoming bullying.
It's okay. You signed up for this.
I didn't really.
She did. Fucking liar.
We're in your ears now.
Mm.
Can we just get to the interview now? I think we should just get to the interview.
Okay. So wrap this up. What else do we need to know?
Oh, you're going in it now. You
Kayaking or the interview?
Oh, I mean, you could do whatever you want. I don't know. I'm not going to judge you if you kayak and listen to this episode.
Okay.
So Dr. Rachel Proffitt is an assistant professor in the Department of Occupational Therapy at the University of Missouri, and we are sitting down today to talk about her work in OT and video games. So tell us a little bit about you, what drew you to OT, and specifically what drew you to the recovery of those impacted by stroke and traumatic brain injuries.
So I was originally headed for medical school when I was an undergraduate. I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare, and I worked at a camp for individuals with disabilities, sort of a respite camp for caregivers and family members who just need to take a week or two off. And so we were then the caregivers for these individuals, both adults and children. And I loved it. I loved the interactions that I had, the friendships that I made with the campers and the staff there. And I realized that if I was going to go to med school, I wasn't going to have those interactions. And I really enjoyed, working with individuals with a variety of disabilities. And so then I came back to undergrad and had to find a new career path, albeit a related one. And I stumbled upon occupational therapy and realized that this is a good fit for me. A combination of biology and dance as my undergrad majors. So science, arts, science and creativity, which is really what makes up occupational therapy. It's bringing the science in, but then also doing the problem solving, being creative and coming up with ways to help our clients live their life to the fullest. And I'm really glad I went into this field. And then when I was in graduate school, learning to become an OT, I started working in a research lab and working with individuals who had experienced a stroke, and hearing their stories and interacting with them was just so very powerful to me. And I wanted to do something. We were learning about a bunch of different interventions, ways to help them use their arms and legs and participate in daily life. And everything seemed so boring to me. And I said, well, I'm like, there's got to be a way to do this to make it more fun. And a woman from the computer science department, this was at Washington University in St. Louis, where I was going to grad school, came to our lab and said, hey, I have these new approaches using pretty much off the shelf video games, but I want to do this for good, if you will, as she said. And I happened to be in the lab working that day, and I turned to my mentor and I said, "Can I do this? This sounds like kind of that missing piece to what I want to do to work with and help these individuals who've had a stroke." And he said, "Sure." And so it kind of took off from there. And I realized I really liked the research side of it, being able to, bring things then to clinical practice that are fun or exciting, but still also have, I like doing clinical research. So I like being able to interact with, with my study participants and hear how it does impact their daily lives. So that's kind of how I fell into this area, and it's evolved over time. I went from more the development side to now going out and actually running the research studies, doing the testing, and now that things are more developed and ready to use. But it's been a really exciting journey, and really excited to see where it goes from here for me.
The reason I know OT is my daughter's autistic, so they use OT in a variety of settings for her. And I was sort of surprised to run across it in this, thinking about it like using it almost like a PT approach to get back some of those skills. Because it seems to me in my life so autism focused.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about OT and PT, speech therapy in general, is that the practice settings, the populations, the diagnoses that we work with are so varied. I have colleagues that would work with someone like your daughter. I have those that work in nursing homes. I have individuals that do work in what we call like work hardening places for employees trying to get back to their job, individuals that work in psychiatric, acute psychiatric mental health facilities. It really spans the gamut. And that's the one thing I love about OT, is that it is so diverse.
Right.
And so this is sort of one area that I've chosen to take my career and individuals that I've just found a real passion for helping.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So your article that came out earlier this year, actually, about the Vigorous, so it focuses on the use of virtual gaming systems as a self-directed sort of physical therapy for these outpatient stroke victims. So is this something you were already sort of thinking about prior to these COVID shutdowns, or is this practice as a result of these sudden needed increases in these telehealth appointments and working with these folks from home?
So this is something that's been ongoing for a number of years. This was the full study was my colleague Lynn Gauthier. She was at The Ohio State University, now is at University of Massachusetts Lowell. She was the principal investigator for the study. It was a multi-site study. So she had investigators at different places around the country, and was struggling with recruitment at one of the sites. So she reached out to me, knowing that I was in a similar field, knew the research, knew the background. We had interacted at, conferences prior to this, and said, hey, would you be able to recruit some participants? And I said, yeah, I think so. We have a good relationship with our neurological clinics here. We have a registry of individuals that have experienced a stroke that we can reach out to. And I, personally, I want to see this kind of stuff be successful. So I said, sure. And this was 2018, 2019. So pre-COVID. Okay. We actually wrapped up, I believe, in December 2019, so just a few months before everything started shutting down, which I'm very grateful for. So we were able to recruit people and not have to deal with, scheduling issues, what have you. And so the telehealth piece of it had, I think she had the forethought to bring this in. And it's something that I thought, well, yeah, this is going to work, especially given that, here in Missouri, I'm in Columbia, Missouri. And so we're kind of like the center of the state. We serve up to a 2-hour radius away from the city, because we are the closest thing for a lot of people living in our rural areas. And I recognized this when she reached out to me, that this could potentially have a really nice impact on those that are limited in terms of their access to services. They'll take a whole day to come into Columbia just to receive healthcare. And so that's, time spent away from work, caregiver time spent away from work, driving, travel, the fact that they may have one appointment at 9 a.m., then another one at noon. So now they're just sitting and waiting. And so to do something like telehealth, I think, can address a lot of those access barriers. That being said, rural Missouri does have its challenges in terms of internet availability, like a lot of the rural areas of our country, but it's getting better. And even to have, a phone call based telehealth is better than requiring them to drive in to, come to a visit that could be done over the phone. There are some things where you want to see them in person and, do assessments, but a lot of what we do can be done via the phone. So yes, we were thinking about this before COVID. And I think COVID has kind of accelerated the need for things like this in individuals post-stroke, as well as many other diagnoses. And we saw that, this is something that really can be useful and helpful. It's lower cost. It's less of a burden on the individuals that we serve, on their caregivers. Think about, yourself as a parent, the time that you then have to spend organizing and coordinating and, going then to visits and driving, organizing childcare, all of that, to be able to just hop on a quick video conference wherever you are. It's a whole lot easier. Yeah. And for a lot of individuals post-stroke, they won't drive. So they're relying on someone else to do that. it was kind of fortuitous that we had started exploring this before COVID.
Yeah.
And, we saw some great results from that, particularly from the arm that included telehealth.
I imagine that the feeling for you guys in March of 2020 was like, thank God this is done now. We can just start applying it unilaterally, which is definitely what you want in a pandemic,
Yes. I had a number of my other projects. We had to halt study recruitment and, any in-person interactions that were part of the research study. And then, kind of bring those back in. It was probably about June or July when things, at least here in the middle of the country, started opening up a little bit more. I've heard from some of my colleagues that are in more metropolitan areas on the coast that it is still a challenge for them. So to have something like this approach that has a telehealth piece allows for being able to recruit and include individuals in our research studies versus those that require in-person visits.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the science itself in very layman's terms? Because I'm not a scientist and you will lose me immediately. But just about how the study was done, sort of what you were looking for, if any of the results surprised you at all.
Sure. So, like I said, this study was something that had come from a couple of, I would say several years worth of research on my colleague's part, and then she pulled me into this. So really her goal was to look at a video game-based approach for stroke rehabilitation. For individuals post-stroke, at least over 60% have difficulty using their more affected arm in everyday tasks. Like they struggle to reach forward to open up a doorknob or, pull up in their fridge to get a snack out, make a cup of coffee, all those things that we take for granted in our everyday life. They may struggle with because if this is the type of stroke they experience, it impacts the movement on one side of their body. Called hemiparesis. It can affect the arm and the leg, just the arm. And there's also then other effects from other types affecting speech, memory, attention, those things. But we focus more on the motor-based effects, so the ability to use the arm and then the leg in everyday life. And so there's an approach that has been studied over the past several years called constraint-induced movement therapy, or CIMT. And the goal with that one is that you constrain your more or less good side, so the side that was not affected by the stroke, because most people, if we're going to find as humans, we're going to find the most efficient way to do something. And so if one side of your body doesn't work as well, you're going to use the side that works a lot better to accomplish the task. It's lower frustration. It's just easier to do, right? Mm-hmm. But with constraint-induced movement therapy, you then constrain that good side that has been doing everything and essentially force the individual to use their more affected side after a stroke. It can be really challenging and really frustrating for a lot of people because that side has not worked as well after their stroke. But by doing that sort of, high intensity movement, making them use that side and even just little fine motor tasks, having them incorporate that into their everyday routine. So saying, hey, when you go to turn all your light switches on and off in your house at the end of the day, use your more affected side. And sometimes we'll even put like a mitt over their hand to kind of restrict them from using that side and say, all right, try and use your arm in pulling open that cabinet, in flushing the toilet, trying to see if you can pick up the dog food bowl with your more affected side. And, then in the clinic, we do lots of repetitive tasks to get them to, get better at using that side. So there's a lot of good evidence to support that approach. What the video game does is essentially the same sort of approach, but without using the real world objects. You're now playing a video game. So the game makes you use your more affected side to navigate this little sort of kayak or canoe down a rapid. So the game is called Recovery Rapids. So you use your arm to sort of paddle, to scoop up floating debris in the water. So you're helping the environment, batting away spiders and bats that fly over you, using your arm, moving it left and right to steer. But rather than, thinking about picking up these, little beans or whatever in the clinic 20 times, you're playing a game. Mm-hmm. And so now your focus is no longer on you using your arm, but on are you playing the game successfully? It's a lot more fun, but you're still getting that high intensity, high repetitive number of movement and forcing the individual to use that arm. We use the Kinect sensor, so it can say, we can tell it only the right arm is the one that's able to control the game, and that's their more affected side. If they try and use their better side, it won't work. So it's a natural constraint through playing the game. And so that's the game that Dr. Gauthier had created. And she wanted to see, does this lead to improvement? So in science, if we were to just have everybody play the game and everybody got better, people would go, well, was it because of the game? Or was it because everybody just naturally got better? Did everybody were there other things in their life that, or what we call confounders, that impacted the results of that? So in science, what you have to do is compare what you want to see. Does it help people get better, to other things that are comparable? So we're now comparing the video game to the standard constraint-induced movement therapy. Again, both of those, they have the same type of approach. You're forcing the individual to use that arm. It's just one's in person and one's a video game. So now we can say both groups get better. It's likely because that approach just works overall. If the video game group gets better than the constraint-induced movement therapy group, we can say yes, because it is the approach and because the video game's likely more fun, more engaging, all of that, which is a little bit of what we saw in our findings. We added a couple other what we call study arms in here. So we compare the video game, the standard constraint-induced movement therapy. We then had a video game with added telehealth sessions to it. So we realized that just having the individual play the game, it relied on them making their own schedule and being consistent with playing the game. I mean, I'm a person that when I've done some physical therapy in the past, I haven't always been the most consistent in following my exercise programs. And a lot of people aren't, and we know this as therapists. So adding in the telehealth calls had these additional check-ins with a therapist to say, hey, how's it going? They could see how much the individual was playing the game. They could then say, here's some things to think about doing in your everyday life now that your arm is starting to get a little bit better. Do some problem solving, some strategy training with them. And so that was the little plus piece to one of the other study arms. And then our fourth comparison arms, we had 4 study arms here. The last one was just sort of what we call sort of standard occupational therapy. Unfortunately, a lot of individuals in terms of healthcare coverage only get 1, maybe 2 visits a week, and typically only for 8 to 10 weeks. Medicare, I believe, covers up to about 26 visits a year if you in outpatient therapy if you've had a stroke. That's it. Wow. And it's not a lot, no. And so that was our fourth arm comparison, basically to compare to what does standard care look like. Some places are starting to incorporate the constraint-induced movement therapy, but most it's just 1 hour a week. And, that's it. Honestly, during that hour, most of what we're trying to do is talk with them through, how's it going? How are you using your arm? Giving them some strategies, talking with the caregiver, doing some assessments to see how they're doing. But our time is really limited with them. Right. We can't get in that high intensity practice that we see with constraint-induced movement therapy. So those were the 4 arms, and we saw some really nice results. Most of them did better than the standard therapy, which is to be expected because you're doing a whole lot more movement in those other 3 arms than you are in standard therapy. So that did not surprise us. One of the things we did find was that the arm that had those added telehealth visits saw a greater improvement. And that was really, really nice to show that you still need those little bit of check-ins with the therapist to keep people on track and to help them then figure out how can they use their arm in their everyday life. They start using their arm more in their everyday life. They then get better at playing the game. They then play the game more. They start getting improvement. They then get better in everyday life. And it's like this cyclical process that happens, leading to greater improvement rather than just relying on people to manage their own schedule and play the game on their own.
So did folks have access to the game just in general and they could play it whenever, or did they have these sort of structured times where they could only access it during those meetings or whatever?
They could, so they got a whole computer and the Kinect sent home with them. Oh, cool. If an individual didn't have a TV or a monitor to hook into, we provided one for them, and so they could play whenever they wanted. We had people that had gone back to work So they were only able to play before or after. Some individuals, we had a lot of people that were kind of like our late morning, you finish your coffee and all of that, and then they would sit down and play the game at 10 or 11 a.m. We had some people that were the evening people. They like to do it later on. Some were afternoon. It was really dependent on how it fit into their schedule, and so they could play ideally as much as they wanted to. We gave them here's sort of what you should be doing as a prescription, so to speak, but we don't prescribe an OT, but here's sort of what you're supposed to do. And then we could check in and see how they're doing. That game was connected up to their Wi-Fi or internet, so we could check in with them.
So this game was like basically created to target some of these things, because I was originally thinking that we were playing like World of Warcraft or something, and that seemed really hard. I don't think I could do that.
No, this game, it was created specifically for stroke rehabilitation.
That makes way more sense than how I had originally envisioned it. So any other applications of this technology that you'd like to see implemented? Like, what do you think the future of this like gaming system in OT sort of looks like? I know you talked a little bit about it a little bit earlier, but I was thinking as soon as I started coming across it, this would really help get, people in rural areas more access to this kind of care.
Yeah. The nice thing is with the game, they could choose when to do it. And then with the telehealth piece of it, they're doing everything in their home. And with the game, because we use the Microsoft Kinect, that sensor is able to essentially track the whole body moving in space without having to put any markers or headsets or hold controllers or anything. You just literally sit or stand in front of it. It knows where your head or your shoulders and your elbows and your hands are in three-dimensional space. It also knows how close or how far away from the sensor you are. And all those data are recorded by the computer. And so we've built this into the game. And so the therapist can go back in and look and check and see not only how much did the individual play the game, but how well are they doing? How much are they moving their arm? How much are they able to bend their elbow or, bring their shoulder up over their head? And a lot of times we're not able to do those assessments in traditional practice until we see the person in our clinic.
Right.
So this Connect is kind of like our eyes in the home to see how is this person doing and progressing in, playing the game and essentially in progressing in their therapy. So that's additional data that we previously haven't had. And that helps then inform us as clinicians to then make some decisions as to what sort of things we want to recommend for the individual to do and change our treatment plan for them. So the more frequent assessment really helps us as clinician. So, this is sort of like one of those next steps into how do we use, health data from things like sensors or wearable devices or mobile phones. This is sort of like the next phase of what I would call precision rehabilitation, precision healthcare, precision medicine. So using data that come from the individual to help us then guide and customize treatment. Like I said, we've only been able to do this in the clinic using our standard assessment, but now we can have people wear or have things in their homes that give us a whole lot more data than we ever have had before.
I imagine that's been helpful sort of in circumventing some of these insurance-built parameters. If they only can go 26 times, but they're a stroke victim and now they have to go back to work and everything, sort of having this technology allows us, I imagine, some extra hours to actually cater a lot of what they actually need.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's something where, as a clinician, as an OT, to then take the time out to do, a 1 hour session with the individual. This is now time that I can take just a little bit of time to look at their data, make some recommendations. We can have a short, telehealth call with them that's maybe only 15, 30 minutes. I can now serve a larger number of people by this availability of telehealth and data from, different types of sensor system, video games, those kinds of things. And, ideally, then we also see improved outcomes for the individuals that we serve. So individuals post-stroke, and I think there's other applications, other populations. I'm currently working with older adults with disabilities living in our rural area, individuals with multiple sclerosis, ALS, Parkinson's. I like the neurological populations. It's a passion for me. But then even orthopedic conditions, they may have to go in more frequently to, have a cast or something looked at, and assessed in person. But still to be able to have that done via telehealth, to get them further, faster, and recover earlier, is one of the things that we want to see as clinicians, and then be able to, like I said, serve more individuals and help them maybe reach a higher level of recovery than they might have before, and sooner than they might have before.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I'm like so astonished by this work being done. So, do you play video games? I guess that's my next question.
I do some. I play more now, I think, than I did before. I have a 6-year-old who has recently gotten into Minecraft.
Yeah.
I don't play with him, but I hear all about Minecraft. But we play a lot of the Lego games together. We have a Switch, so we do Mario Kart Racing, some of the other Mario games, and those are a lot of fun. I think for me, just the making it fun and taking the attention for the individual off of them and their body and focusing it elsewhere, it really does lead to better recovery. There's all kinds of literature in the motor learning area that supports that, what we call external locus of control. So you're focused on other things, or success in tasks, not necessarily on success in how far can I move my arm, but can I reach that cabinet that's overhead? So it takes the focus off the individual and onto the out in the environment. And so playing the game takes your focus off of you and puts it into, how well am I doing in the game? Am I able to go down the river faster and steer around the rocks and pick up all the bottles out of the water? And you forget that you're now using your arm to play that game, and the focus is off of your body and onto the game itself. It does lead to faster and better recovery.
I imagine. I mean, I'm from the generation, I think, that our parents were like, oh, the video games are making you violent, whatever. But I'm a parent now. I have a 6-year-old. She's nonverbal autistic, but she does use Minecraft, and that's how we get a picture of her world. She learns to use her fingers a little bit better. We understand when she's having bad days by how often she's bombing her villagers. We're interpreting a lot just from that. So I'm very, very pro video game. I'm very bad at them, but we're very pro video games in this house.
Yeah, I think they're fun. And, my husband, he does all kinds of racing games, the Forza games and whatnot. And we have now a steering wheel with the pedals and everything. And my son will use that. And, everybody's like, oh, he's going to, be such a bad driver because he's crashing into walls and everything. And I'm like, actually, he's quite good at using the steering wheel. Yeah, there's times when he has fun and it's playful and he'll drive over trees and whatever. But I watched him play Mario Kart, whatever. He is steering and drifting on that track. He picked that up way faster than I did.
Yeah.
So the control that he gets from that, I think will translate to him being a pretty good driver. My husband actually drives for Lyft and Uber, did valet parking. He is a phenomenal driver, and he grew up. We're the elder millennials. He grew up playing a lot of those games as well, and he's a fantastic driver. I imagine he probably did the same thing as my son and drove over trees and into walls. But it's you're learning sort of what can you do and what can you not do, but you're still getting a lot of those. Your body's response and the motor control, the visual processing that I didn't play those games growing up. So, my visual processing, it probably isn't quite as fast as them. I think there's a lot to be said for using, video games, computer games, as a medium or a mode for delivery. These games have, that I'm working with, they have a purpose. We see just off the shelf games being used for kiddos with autism and other diagnoses, to then get them to be able to maybe verbalize a few things, to have some of those social interactions with their peers, to again sort of communicate in a nonverbal way what's going on. So I think there's a lot of great applications for video game for all the populations we serve as OTs.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm an elder millennial, so I grew up playing Mario Kart, the original, and I loved the Rainbow Road, and I've never once driven off a real road. So I think that's, just adding to the thesis. Thank you so much for being here and for chatting with us today. So where can our listeners find more of your work?
So there's the article that's out there. honestly, because I am at a public university, University of Missouri. If you type my name in University of Missouri, you'll be able to come across my faculty webpage. I do have a Twitter, so games and then the number 4 rehab OT.
Okay.
And sometimes we'll post a number of things. A lot of times some of my articles and science are shared on there. I am on LinkedIn for other professionals that would like to connect. And again, for the game itself, if you Google Recovery Rapids, you'll come across the game itself and the website, and you can learn a little bit more about that. It's exciting where we're going with this research and what we've been able to show works. And I'm always open to emails and connections from individuals that we serve, professionals, clinicians. I like to just get all this out here so that it can make its way into practice sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before we hopped on here, that there is this huge gap between when we publish things and when things actually get implemented in practice. So anything to help narrow that gap is extremely helpful. So I'm very grateful that you all are doing this podcast.
It was absolutely great chatting with you. I hope that we help you narrow that gap in some way. Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.